Welcome back, class. Alright, let's start with a wrap-up from the last class and a preview. Today we'll be wrapping up some of the ideas from chapter on Freud and begin the chapter and finish it hopefully on Wilhelm Wundt. So we finished up with Freud, looking at the psychosexual stages of development and the controversy associated with it. We also looked at Freud's current standing on ideas such as repressed memory. The idea of repressed memory has sort of not fared well over the last few years. The idea is that we don't really see a lot of evidence that memories are going to be repressed as Freud envisioned them. Some research on Elizabeth Loftus focuses on that as well. We see that one of the issues on Freud's current studying that he did not really do experiments. There was no controlled experimentation, as well as his issues of his theories not being very falsifiable, and of course we talked about the overemphasis on sex. Currently, we see his therapy, psychoanalysis, does have a great deal of time involved in it as well as expense. But he is really well stood on the idea of him popularizing the discipline of psychology. After Freud, we see the Neo-Freudians, Anna Freud, Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and Karen Horney added their own new twist and focuses on the ideas of Freud. Now what we'll be looking at is Wilhelm Wundt, who started the first school of psychology in a sense, and it could be called volunteerism. He stressed volition or selective attention. He had various research focuses. He also had the understanding of the goal of psychology to understand basic processes of the mind and complex conscious phenomena. Experience can be seen as mediate or immediate, and we'll see that a little bit later in the upcoming slides. He used introspection for immediate experience. He looked at two basic types of mental experiences, sensations and feelings. Perception he saw as passive. Apperception, what one attends to, is an active process. The perceptual field, what we're able to perceive, made up of the stimulation environment plus the physical makeup of the person plus the person's past experience, an idea we've seen before in our lectures. Complex higher mental processes are deduced from culture, religion, and laws, not experimentation. And he is sort of like the granddaddy of all psychology. He trained many psychologists that went off to develop their own perspectives of psychology, their own theories, in their own schools. So, volunteerism. Volunteerism is the name that Wundt gave to his approach of psychology. It was volunteerism because of its emphasis on will, choice, and purpose. Volunteerism then was psychology's first school, not structuralism as is often claimed. So I know some people will come out and say that, but still you'll be hard pressed to find anybody talk about volunteerism. We normally hear as the first school of psychology structuralism. Wilhelm Wundt, a German medical doctor, a physiologist, psychologist, and professor. He studied briefly with Mueller before becoming an assistant to Hermann von Helmholtz in 1858. He created the first psychology lab, studied the basic and higher order thinking and applied issues in 1879. This is the date that we have established as the start of the official discipline of psychology as an academic discipline. There are many other competing ideas as to how psychology and when psychology may have started, but this is the one that has been agreed to of 1879. Also formed the first journal of psychological research, Psychological Studies, in 1881. Wundt's achievements and contributions. Well, he took the diverse achievements of other researchers in his own early research on attention and synthesized them into a unified program of research. He determined that this program must stress selective attention, that is, volition. Psychology's first school was formed. And what we mean by school? A school can be defined as a group of individuals who share common assumptions, work on common problems, and use common methods. It's similar to Kuhn's paradigm that we discussed previously. So this school was called volunteerism. Now, when he established this lab, this academic lab for psychological research, he had several directions of research: psychophysics, the measurement of sensation; psychometry, duration of mental processes; time sense, time relations of perceptions, estimation of intervals of time; and the association of ideas, the time it takes for one idea to suggest another. So we see a whole variety of things he was interested in, and it was, to a large extent, a very solid research program that he established as the first psychological laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. The laboratory was 4 rooms, but ultimately expanded to 6, had an international collection of 20 researchers, worked in groups of at least 2. 2 researchers needed with the one acting as a subject and the other taking charge of the apparatus and registering the results. The research would be published in the studies in psychological studies. Now, one thing I need to focus on here, and we'll see this a little bit later as well, the subjects of these experiments were the students that he was training and teaching. But they were not the naive subjects that we see today in research. They were well trained as subjects for their experiments. Now, Wilhelm Wundt had a certain perspective that he saw as the goal of psychology. Per Wundt, psychology's goal was to understand both simple, basic processes of the mind and complex, higher mental processes, conscious phenomena. For simple phenomena, experimentation was to be used. However, for complex phenomena, experimentation could not be used. Only various forms of naturalistic observation could be employed. So, the 2 types of experience that he focused on was the mediate experience and immediate experience. Mediate experience and data are obtained via measuring devices and thus is not direct. Immediate experience and data are events in human consciousness as they occurred, and he saw this immediate experience was to be the subject matter for psychology. So, let's give a quick example. I do not immediately hear the truck coming down the street. I immediately hear the sound. That is like the impression that we've talked about in the previous chapter. They immediately hear the sound. That is the immediate experience. My perception, when I hear the sound, the immediate experience. When I hear the sound, I think of it as a truck. My perception of the truck, in this case, is immediate. The immediate experience is your perception of that truck, how you have made sense of that perception or that sense as a truck. So the idea here is that the immediate experience is the raw stuff. The immediate experience is after you've done some stuff to it. You have now perceived it as a truck. So the methodologies employed by Wilhelm Wundt employed a variety of methods for experimentation, but primarily he used introspection. His experimental introspection was not unstructured self-observation used by earlier philosophers. Wundt's introspection used laboratory instruments to present stimuli. In most instances, the subject was to respond with a simple response such as yes or no or pressing a key. These responses were made without any description of internal events. He used to study immediate experience, but not the higher mental processes. 2 basic types of mental experience. Sensation. Sensations occurred when a sense organism is stimulated and the impulse reaches the brain, described in terms of modality, intensity, and quality. Feelings, accompanied sensations, and could be described along 3 dimensions in a tridimensional theory of feelings: pleasantness or unpleasantness, excitement or calm, strain or relaxation. So we have the 2 basic mental experiences of sensation and feelings. Sensations being the sense organ is stimulated and the impulse reaches the brain. Then feelings, accompanying sensations, could be described along these 3 dimensions of pleasantness and unpleasantness, excitement, calm, strain, or relaxation. So Perception, attention, apperception, and creative synthesis. Perception is passive process governed by the stimulation present, the physical makeup of the person, and the person's past experience. Again, an idea that we've seen a couple of times already. So your perception is made of whatever is the stimulus in front of you, your personal physical makeup, your physical capabilities, and your training, your education, your cultural background, your experiences. The interaction of these factors make up the person's perceptual field. Now, the part of this field the person attends to, the part of this field the person focuses on, is apperceived. Apperception and selective attention are the same. Apperception is active and voluntary. Hence, that is why it was called the school of voluntarism. You, through volition, through voluntary focus on a particular item, voluntarism. Creative synthesis, the elements which are attended to can be arranged and rearranged as the person wills. Thus, arrangements not experienced before can be produced. So you can get all this stuff that you have attended to, that you have perceived, apperceived, and then rearrange them all in a creative fashion to create something new. So, mental chronometry. Used a method by Francis Donders to measure differences in reaction time when various mental activities were required by the experimental situation. Physical causality versus psychological causality. Physical causality is a reality because events could be predicted on the basis of antecedent conditions. Psychological causality was not possible. All right? The idea is that there are too many things to actually deal with in that particular instance. Now let's look at another. Wilhelm Wundt, as we stated earlier, we could use for the basic processes, basic mental process, could employ experimentation to examine them. But higher mental processes could not. So the role of higher mental processes in cultural psychology, Wundt did not believe that higher mental processes could be studied experimentally. They were reflected in human culture, which involves a whole bunch of things that are the artifacts of how we live and what we do and how we relate to one another. The nature of higher mental processes could be deduced from the study of such cultural products as religion, social customs, myths, history, language, morals, art, and the law. If you really think about it, if you examine, and there are many scientific fields that examine each of these areas, if you examine these areas, you do indeed learn a lot about the people who have certain religions, who practice certain customs, who have certain myths, who produce certain history, have certain languages, and so on. So 20-year study of these things in the cultural realm, 20-year study of these things culminated in his 10-volume work, Cultural Psychology. So he did a lot of work on that.